So thanks everyone for joining us. While everyone's been, some of us have been sitting on our asses and watching Netflix and different things during this time, Tom's put together quite the collection of works, 20 of which we're showing tonight for the show Floating Downstream. I think it's really shown how he's grown as an artist. I've known Tom for 4 or 5 years now. Let me mute my parents. Okay. So we're good now. Everyone known him for about 4 or 5 years. All right, I'm gonna mute everyone. I think David's iPhone. Let me see.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, you're on 2 different things. Okay. All right, mute them. All right, oh my God.
Dave, there's something.
All right, they're all muted. Sorry about that, guys. So, Tom and me have known each other since the 14 Factory where we worked 4 or 5 years ago. It was kind of interesting. I was managing musicians and managing bands, and didn't really know so much about art. Just started working at a gallery and helped out with the 14th Factory. And Tom was like, "Oh, would you ever like manage an artist or work with an artist?" And I didn't even know what that meant. But then I was able to, check out his work. We maybe had one or too many beers, but I enjoyed his work so much. We started working together. I think I even painted some strokes on a piece, and it's grown into a blossoming relationship. I couldn't be more proud of him as a person or as an artist. And I'm really excited that I'm able to bring all of his works to life tonight for Floating Downstream. So I'm going to talk a little bit to Tom and, find out a little bit about him as an artist, just so everyone can get an idea of who he is. He is Australian and American, if people don't know that. But I guess, Tom, give everyone, what has your inspiration been during this time, to get these paintings done and working as hard as you have?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks for reminding me. I forgot we did paint together. We did have that painting session together. Yeah. So I think I never really think it's about inspiration anyway. If you're sort of painting, it's kind of, after a while, it sort of turns into, usually there's a list of things you have to do, or you're waiting for certain things to dry, and it's just the process. So I think that the whole pandemic or whatever was just more about having time, and just sort of just more time to actually get on with it, because everything kind of gets in the way, and it just seemed like a good time just to paint as much as I could, I think.
And I know you've been, now you're getting your master's in fine arts at UC Santa Barbara. How do you feel about academia compared to art? I mean, I know, there's always those gallerists or consultants or historians that say, you really need to go through all these things and get great art degrees to really truly be seen as an artist. How do you feel that academia comes in, to your art, and how do you feel about, your master's and how it's been going?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to time. So it's sort of, if doing an MFA is going to afford you more time to actually do the work, then that's great. The program I'm in there's some are more studio focused than others. So this one, I feel like I'm quite busy with other stuff, but that's fine. You kind of do what you can. At the moment, it's all a bit shut down because of COVID. So it's a bit of a non-event at the moment. But in terms of it being, I think, having it at the forefront of your mind though, and you're always reading about it, even the teaching stuff, I guess. So I think it's good, and you kind of treat it as like one time where it can just be the main focus, because usually you're trying to hustle painting with whatever else you're doing to try and survive, or whatever it may be. So in terms of academia and where does the work fit in with that and stuff, I'm not sure, but I'm interested in a very wide range of art. So I like studying a lot of things that don't necessarily relate to what I do as well. So yeah, that can work for me.
And I know, most of your work, as people see, comes from your imagery comes from your subconscious. And you kind of attack a blank canvas a little different than most artists as figures and ideas emerge as you're painting. I guess tell us a little bit about your process and just what's that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a different way of doing it. A lot of people do it this way. It is very improvised, I would say. So, yeah, kind of, and ideally I work on several paintings at the same time, and you're always sort of pushing them along. And I try and really enjoy and focus on the process. So, because it's not clear what I'm trying to get at, or what the end result's going to be. So it's more about feeling it out and just trying to do what feels right. And also making a lot of, I like editing as well and painting over things. So it's sort of not the end of the world if it just goes way off course, Of course, at the time it can be annoying and frustrating, but the idea is that if you're working on different ones at the same time, then it keeps it, you're not overly invested in one thing, and you can and it's almost a way of trying to distract yourself from, because you can have a sort of destructive tendency because if you keep pushing a painting, you can overcook it, or it'll just go brown. If you keep pushing colors in, it's going to go brown. So you have to kind of know when to walk away. And I find the best way to do that is to just think of painting as an energy that's trying to get out. And then if you can kind of redirect it, it's where you direct it can help. Because it's a way, because sometimes I take snapshots on the phone as well, as not for anything else than as a reference. Because when you're watching something change very slowly, over days, it's sort of, when you're watching something change gradually, it's easy to forget what the earlier stages of it may have been. So I often, having an iPhone that you can scroll through and just, and it's really, and again, these photos are just for me, it's just a documentation, but they can help me know the direction a bit. But usually, yeah, it's a tricky one because it's hard to know, because I don't have an objective when I start. So I always enjoy the earlier stages of painting, and then it gets a little, it can be a bit tricky finishing them sometimes.
Yeah. That's great. And basically by what you were saying is it turns brown. So basically if you overdo it, your art turns to shit.
Yeah,
in a sense.
It does. Yeah. Yeah, you have to know when to walk away. And sometimes, sometimes it does that anyway, even if I don't overpaint it, it just, but I think there's a sort of analytical side of the way you look at your own paintings, and then there's the part of you that's actually doing it. And I think it's trying to find a balance between those both, or at least, because I sort of believe that if it's working, it feels good and it's kind of fun. It's like a flow state where you're trying to get the decision making, the decisions between thinking something and doing it. You're trying to shrink that to it. It's like a muscle. You're trying to tighten that muscle as much as you can. And that's not linear either. It doesn't necessarily get better the more you do it. Like sometimes it's just working, and other times you second guess yourself a lot, and you have to do it the wrong way to realize that was a mistake. And that's tricky because that's not always when you're in the mood to work. Because sometimes you can be really in the mood. I can be really in the mood to paint, but those two aren't working well together, And yeah, and other times I might have other stuff. I've got some emails I'm behind on something, but that flow state is going really well. So it's hard to, yeah, it's kind of juggle. Painting's tricky, and then you've got to juggle it with the rest of your life as well, which can be tricky.
And I guess before we start, have people walking in or virtually into the gallery and seeing the pieces from the show, I guess tell us a little bit about Floating Downstream, the title, where it comes from in this series or exhibit.
Yeah, so that's from lyrics, John Lennon lyrics from a Beatles song, Tomorrow Never Knows, off the Revolver album. And he got the lyric, that line floating downstream from, I think it was the Tibet, well, Timothy Leary put it in a book of his, but he got it from like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it's about, well, in the song, it's in reference to an acid trip. So the beginning stages of an acid trip where the immediate appearance of things not being what they seem to be. And it's almost like a guide on how to do it. So it's because it's about the ego, because when you start tripping and you realize that, yeah, it's kind of like the death of the ego, and it can cause panic, or you can relax into it and let it go. And then you kind of, and the idea is that when you do that, you realize everything is connected and everything is all one thing, and it sort of dissolves the ego. But it can be, it's a fun sort of way of the idea of a journey. And then, because I'm interested in hallucinogens, yes, but hallucinating or visualizing, and sort of kind of the idea of manifesting imagery or just hallucinating. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, let's take everyone in. I know everyone's gearing to see the art. So I'm going to bring them in now. Let me do this. So here we go. We'll start with the first piece. Let me know, everyone's good in seeing this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So get a little closer. We kind of set it up like you're in a gallery view. But tell us, this is, so this piece, first piece is Mr. Squiggle, the Man from the Moon.
Yeah, so this one,
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Bill.
Oh, it's oil on canvas for everyone needs to know, and it's 72 inches high by 56 inches wide. And if you're Australian, you know who Mr. Squiggle is, but Tom will give us a little more interpretation on this piece.
Yeah, so Mr. Squiggle was a children's television show that I grew up watching in Australia. And he was a puppet that would come down from the moon, and children would send in squiggles, just some random marks on paper. And then he would put them on his blackboard, and he would sort of draw on them with his pencil nose. He was a puppet, and he was controlled by, he had a long pointy hat, which was where the stick operated. You know, the puppeteer was above it and looking down and drawing on the paper. And anyway, but it was this idea of, yeah, and I hadn't thought about Mr. Squiggle for a long time. And then I was painting, and then I realized that it was kind of a big influence for me in a way, because I'm kind of doing that because I like the gesture. I like gestural mark making and sort of impulsively painting before you have ideas. Like, I love the idea of painting as almost, the physical act of painting is almost finding a groove or a rhythm. And then from that rhythm, you know, you start seeing images or, you know, deciphering specific things that you might want to bring out, or that sort of feels like they suggest themselves. But obviously, I'm just making a mess and then kind of looking in that mess, similar to like a Rorschach test, how you might decipher imagery in ink blots. So I think I hadn't thought about Mr. Squiggle for a long time, and then I was like, oh fuck, that's really how I kind of work. And I was sort of I had a fond memory of it, and it's one of those things. And I looked on YouTube, and it's kind of like sometimes you remember things from childhood as better than they were or different. And I started watching them on YouTube, and it's a great show. It really holds up, and it's fun, and I like the idea of it, and it made me want to. I wasn't so much a kid that was always drawing or anything, but I think maybe I was at one point. Anyway, it made me feel like doing art, which I thought was good. And he's kind of a trippy character. He reminds me a bit of Ziggy Stardust in a way, which I didn't know at the time, but I thought about that a bit later.
And, you know, I love how you always have different figures in your work, whether it's a foot. I know the pieces that I have In our place, I'm always seeing something different and finding a new object or almost a new storyline through your paintings. I guess tell us a little bit about that and how they kind of merge and come out of the paintings as you're working on these pieces.
Yeah, so this one is a bit different in there because I've introduced imagery that's specific to it. It's quite loose and not too literal, but there's a couple of Mr. Squiggles in there. There's almost like a snail figure with the television on its back for a shell. That's Gus, who actually was a puppet from Mr. Squiggle. And the TV on it that I've put as like static or snow or whatever you want to call it, you know, the fuzz. Because that was another kind of visualization technique for me as well. Kind of looking, you know, when you look into the TV that's just snowing. Is that the word for it? You know, when it's static. I mean,
Yeah, I just call it static.
Static.
Or fuzz or whatever.
Yeah, because
I've never heard of snowing, but that's a new way to do it.
Right, snowing, yeah. Yeah, because I used to trance out and just staring at that as well. And then from those movements, you know, it's kind of like floating downstream. You get in a relaxed state and then try and encourage visuals to happen, if you like. So I put that on the TV, but to your question, I mean, this is an unusual one because I've introduced images, but normally they just not appear. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in what happens when you have how different images can read differently next to each other or in the context of each other. So I'm always trying to see, there's a way I think about how it works. It may not actually be how it does work, but for the purposes of my process, it does work that way. So it's almost like tarot, you know, where when you have different cards next to each other, they mean different things than if the two of them were with different cards. So I like that kind of mirror, and then seeing how it kind of reads when two things are put next to each other. And often that will apply to different paintings. Sometimes I'll get images that are in some paintings and I'll work it into a different painting to see how it changes or how it evolves in a different environment. And yeah, I like the idea that different images next to each other can imply narrative, or at least your mind tries to make sense of things, and it kind of plays with that. Because if you have two things next to each other, you know, your mind's going to try and rationalize what they're doing together and what it could mean. And that's true of both the viewer looking at it, but also for me when I'm painting it. Because then when I see two things next to each other, it might suggest something, and then I'll introduce that something, and that will change what's already there. And I try and do that again with the freedom of knowing that if it doesn't work, you can paint it out. So, and even if you paint it out, you're more likely to paint over it, and it's going to turn into something else or suggest something else.
That's great. And I feel like we need to find the creators of Mr. Squiggle and get this in their homes. But let's move on to the next piece. If anyone has any questions on these pieces, just message me, or you can take yourself off mute and ask. Does anyone have any questions about this piece for Tom? All right, so we're going to move on. The next piece is going to be the same size, larger piece, 72 by 56. It's titled Moon Paddle Dream Fishing. Really like the dark colors in this one. But, you know, we'll let Tom talk about it a little bit. I wanted Tom to talk about, I don't really know what it is, but I know you've mentioned it before, pareidolia, and how it pertains to your painting style.
Yeah, well, that's the thing I was talking about, where you sort of, when you're looking into clouds and you see images in the clouds or in the ink blots of the Rorschach test. So it's the idea of just seeing things suggested, but then it's a loop, because you're not, it's never static, because you feel like maybe a form is suggested, and then you'll paint into it to try and bring it out, or you'll paint around it to isolate it, which will make it come forward, or not necessarily come forward, but it will isolate it. Yeah, so it's almost like a dialogue with the painting in a way, because I'm a big fan of, I love starting paintings where you don't have any idea in your head, and there's no, because when you get to the later part of the painting, you have to obviously have some things that are working, and you need to do stuff to the painting to make it resolved, but you need to be true to the bits that are working. And it can be hard to know what is going to make the thing work as a whole. But in the early stages, it really is play fun. Like, you can just throw stuff around and then have fun. So yeah, I like, so with these ones, yeah, there was a sort of field. I think of it as like an energy field, where you activate the whole canvas. Not always, but in the case of these black and white ones in particular. And then in doing that,
Has it been making it bigger?
yeah, you see forms that are sort of suggested, and then you bring them out. So, and then what happens is you get all these different elements happening together, and the eye moves around the canvas. So there's sort of it's almost like a dream logic as well, where there's an uncertainty, where you feel like you have a grip on what it's representing or what it is, and then it can sort of, as you move around, it can morph into something else, or there can be something completely unrelated next to it. But I'm very interested in sort of the rhythm of visuals, of how it works, like how your eye travels around the painting. That's why I tend not to have big contrasting blocks of color so much, where the eye rests. And I love paintings that do that, but for my particular way of approach to painting, I tend not to do that so much. And then you get into the big picture, but then you have a lot of details as well. So sometimes there's really quite small elements within a bigger painting, and if you're looking at it closer up, yeah. But a lot of that doesn't apply when we're looking at just on the screen.
Yeah, I can get closer for you. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about different elements of things that are occurring in the painting.
Yeah.
And I've sort of done that. And actually I did that thanks to you, Billy, because I've written about my work, obviously, for, like all artists have an artist statement, and then you write about it. But it was at your encouraging that I wrote descriptively what was actually occurring in the paintings.
Uh-huh.
And it occurred to me I hadn't done that before, because that was actually, in doing that, I found patterns and reoccurring things in the work that are really obvious to I guess. They should have been obvious to me, but it was only in writing about it that I realized that.
Sorry,
and I think, and that goes back to the subconscious, because I'm interested in if you can get in this flow state where you try and create images. That's sort of what I mean by the subconscious, because you're gonna have things and patterns and images that reoccur. And I think that I want to do a type of painting that encourages that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
this is having a huge issue.
Yeah, so this one you have, so there's a lot of figures within the overall landscapes. And then you'll get a bit of a theme. So I think in this one, there's these sort of amphibious creatures that are fishing. And then this is a big foot. It's a raft in like an ocean, and you've got the stars in the sky, and they're reflected in the ocean. And yes, and it's sinking, but it's the idea of fishing. It's about the subconscious, like the moment. It's meant to be the moment when you're falling asleep, and when you're going from thinking rationally to when dreams start happening. Yeah, I like that. I like that moment of uncertainty where things or don't appear as what you thought they might, and you get that kind of slippage. And I would like to be able to paint that where it feels like a painting of something, but then the image, it slips away a bit. Yeah.
All right. Ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's move on.
And this is going to be electric shock, same size, oil on canvas again.
Yeah. So these, again, a lot of these paintings are about, I'm trying to look at whether inspired by reality or just entirely made up, but the idea of, because I'm I'm really passionate about religious art, but I'm an atheist, and I was sort of raised as an atheist, but I've always been drawn to the drama and the intensity of religious art. And I've always felt that, and I always thought religion is such a great motivation for people to make art. And I think that, I'm someone that believes in evolution and things like that. So I like the idea of kind of looking at, and I'm not scientific in the sense, I don't look at things in the world and want to know what makes them how they are. It's more, I like the mystery of it. I kind of like not knowing how it's done. But I also am very attracted aesthetically to the sort of fire and brimstone kind of crazy religious stuff in terms of painting. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is invent like evolutionary processes, or if you could show things evolving within the picture frame, or if you could show, like, think of a painting as an ecosystem. So you have, so if each painting could have its own kind of natural law, or so if it could have its own, an ecosystem that works in. So this one is about shucking shells. I'm really interested in pearls. I've always liked pearls and the idea that they're produced from mollusks, but the process of the pearl is actually when an intruding thing like a grain of sand gets inside of a shell, and the mollusk coats it in nacre, and then all these layers harden over a long period of time, and that forms a pearl. So I think that, and because I don't have religion, I feel that I can just take anything from science or just the natural world. And again, I'm not overly inspired by the natural world by itself, but you can kind of take things from it, and I can put my own drama into it, or intensity, or I can give it a feeling. I don't know if I'm doing this, but what I would like to do is give some of those things the feeling of, the kind of themes of guilt, retribution, salvation, religious ecstasy, euphoria, all of those sorts of things that you don't get with evolution because it happens so slowly. So I like the idea of falsifying or injecting my impression of certain evolutionary processes with that kind of drama. I like the drama.
Yeah, no, love that. And I guess the next thing, we'll go on to the next one because I had a question that kind of pertains to both of these. This is just, amazing to me. It just pops so much with the colors. I guess when you're choosing colors, is it, are you just kind of blending and hoping it comes together? Do you pick your palette before you start painting, or how does that process go?
Yeah, that's a good question, Billy, because I never used to do that. This one's a bit, well, let me say, so I used to just wing it, like in terms of the color choices were improvised as well. But then I was getting myself into problems there where I would have certain things, because you have to realize, because they're quite large paintings. So because some areas are detailed, when I'm working on it, I can be in one corner, but it can fill my whole field of vision. and then I can have something that's going, I feel it's going well, but then when I stand back, it's not working with the top left-hand corner kind of thing. And what I found was one of the problems was that I was using colors and they were getting too much. They were getting entangled and you couldn't, and then it became not a unified thing. So I was ending up with a situation where I had some of the painting I liked and some of it I didn't, which it's not going to work. So then I started, it was actually from school, from here, I was a TA for a painting class with an artist here, painter Yumiko Glover, great painter. And she was teaching color theory. And I never really, I was a bit of a dick in school. I didn't really learn a lot of that stuff, which I did. I wish I sort of did a bit better job now. But when I was in her class, I started thinking about developing color schemes before I started. And then that really freed it up because, you know, I want to be improvising the works. So if I have a color scheme going into it already that's going to work, then that's something that, because often I'll be in one area of a painting and I'll see something somewhere else and I want to jump in and paint it, but I can't because these brushes all have these colors on it. That's a whole different thing, but if it's unified. But this is a different example, Billy, because this is really, yeah, they're all relatively recent, but this one kind of was improvised. So everything I'm saying is true, but not of this one. This one was a bit unusual. I actually started with, I bought an oil stick. I tried out oil sticks, which I hadn't done for a long time. So it's actually got yellow lines in it that are from an oil stick. That's how I started the painting. And then the rest of that was sort of improvised. And this was one I spent a lot of time on. You know, some take longer than others, but this one was, yeah, really, and it's sort of, the idea is that it's all an entanglement of vines, and then you have these growing on the vines.
I just want to put it in there so don't forget.
I was reading about, you know, studying at school at the time, I was studying Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy, and so I was really interested in this, you know, winemaking process, and then I've referenced the traditional role of women's feet in the winemaking process. And then, yeah, so I like to think because it's a vine, it all sort of is organically entangled in one thing. But that doesn't really answer your question about colors. But,
No, that's okay. Don't worry about that. I know that Betty Wick out there, Orion, would love this with the wine making and the grapes and everything like that.
Yeah.
Her son's a winemaker.
yeah,
That's
right.
That's where I found her work, was up in Paso Robles, or is it?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, wine's good.
No, he makes great wine. I'm still waiting on my shipment. So, and then the next one we have here is toe painter.
Yeah, so I do paint feet a lot.
Yeah.
As it happens, but yeah, this one I like the idea of a painting. I had in my mind the idea of I want to do a painting of toes holding toenail polish and then painting other toes. So this gives an insight into how this is as close as I get to having an idea of a painting before starting. And I thought, because I love the idea of, you know, because in my mind, maybe not academically or intellectually, but painting is it's joyful as well. It's kind of like when you listen to music with a groove. I think of it as like a groove. You know, it's meant to feel good. And yeah, and then so I thought the idea of these toes painting each other would be a sort of a joyful thing. And then it kind of turned into, and again, because there's not really anything that realistic in it really, but then it turned into this thing where, and there's other things happening in it that occur in other paintings as well. So you've got this cotton wool between the toes because they're being painted, that features a bit. You have there's a lot of these amorphous sort of creatures. And I think I'm interested in the idea of evolution. So you can have things that, figures that evolve as they go along. And then you have fake nails in there. There's a lot of wind instruments. I'm really interested in like seashells and sound reverberating wind instruments. You have these kind of, toes playing. There's a lot of toes playing instruments. And this is very inspired by, like the Luana, the half moon that's on the top of the fingernail. I really like that part of the fingernail. So they sort of feature a lot in the paintings as well. And yeah, I'm trying to capture a lot of movement as well. They're meant to have a sense of, even though it's hard to say what they're about, they're meant to seem really purposeful. Like they're meant to give the impression that they know what they're about, if that makes sense.
No, totally.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to Foot Pine Blues, just because we have a lot of works to get through.
Yeah.
I love the pineapple,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was sort of I actually thought I'd finished this painting, and then, and it's everything that you see, and then I added the pineapple skin to it. It was one of the, sometimes you resolve a painting, and it's resolved, but it's not enough. Like it's not interesting enough or something. So it's not like there's an element missing that's not making it feel like a unified thing, but it's just not doing it enough for you or something. It's not entertaining enough, or it's just lacking something. And then I thought it would be great to have pineapple skin on it. And that's a different way of painting for me usually, whereas that was, I made the decision that would look good, and then I kind of executed it. So that wasn't an improvised thing. That was like a sit-down job of going, okay, well, I think this would work if I do this, and then I'll put it on it. And it's still like, it's a pretty awkward painting. Yeah, I mean, maybe in a good way, I don't know, but it's sort of tricky because you arrive at paintings through a whole lot of different processes. And then this one's unusual for me because it was like a last minute element that I thought, well, if I put this in, maybe it'll work. But yeah, I don't know. This is a tricky painting, actually.
Yeah, and I know you spoke, we're going to go to the next one, but I know you've spoke a lot, a little bit on the ecosystem. I mean, what does the ecosystem mean to you? I know it plays a lot in all your paintings.
Yeah, so the ecosystem is the idea if you can make a painting that has a feeling of its own natural law. So if you can, kind of like in a dream, if something happens in a dream and you wake up and you're like, what the hell that was strange or unusual, but in the dream it made sense. So I like the idea of creating an ecosystem where there's the feeling of a logic of the way things unfold. And if you can, and again, there's one, I would like to create that for the viewer, which I don't know if it is, but at the same time, I'm trying to do that for myself in a way by getting out of the way. So if I can create the elements of a work, and then it's almost like how, with writers, when they say, if a writer writes a character and they say, if you've written the character well enough, then you can put the character in any situation and then the character will write itself because you know exactly how it would react. It's probably a bad example, actually. It's almost the opposite. But yeah, I like to create the feeling of an ecosystem, and then if I introduce something or if things evolve from it. Yeah, I kind of mangled that answer.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
It made sense. I thought it made sense. So.
Well, maybe it didn't, but maybe that's okay.
So this next one, Black Ocean Seashell Resonance, is normally Tom works with larger canvases. This is smaller. I'm going to get out of this and show you guys kind of up close, but it's a triptych, which is always interesting to me when artists can make a story out of 3 different canvases. So tell us a little bit about this, Tom, and then I'll bring it up. A little.
Yeah, I think I like that, particularly the idea of a triptych where, yeah, and it is smaller. So what is it? They're exactly a quarter size of one of the larger ones.
Yeah.
So half the width, half the height. Yeah, and obviously I paint them all at the same time, or they're next to each other, and so it feels. In fact, the fact that it's a triptych didn't change the process at all. I almost look at that and think, well, that could be spread out. That could be in one painting. It would be overkill, actually. I don't know. Yeah. But yes, I think, and again, obviously I went in this is black and silver. So I went into this with that was already decided when I started. And then, yeah, again, improvised gestural mark making, certain images and shapes suggest things, and then those things form patterns. That's what I'm looking for, kind of patterns. So you'll see patterns in this. So this one, there's a theme of like circling a drain that comes up a lot in the work. You have these rowboats that are out to sea. And again, I think the ocean, the ripples in the ocean. Then I'm really interested in the idea of below the surface, like the subconscious. So you often have these rowboats that are almost like moons, and then they're not struggling. It's meant to be a little bit of wrestling, but also something about the depths. And this one looks at I'm really interested in the Greek myth of the sirens. I love music, and I love the idea that music and attraction to whatever you're into, but the idea of music and attraction being so compelling that it can pull you out of, rational thought and almost feel like a spell. I really like that idea, whether it be, and as well, especially as an atheist, you're always looking for these transcendental experiences. And often, the atheists I know tend to love music because that's the quickest way to get there. And I think, I don't make paintings. I don't make paintings about music, but it sort of informs my desire to paint. And a lot of the paintings are about desire. So I would like to think it's in there somewhere. I don't know if it shows, and maybe it doesn't matter if it doesn't show. But yeah, and then you have these kind of rowboats that aren't really going anywhere. Maybe they're circling a drain, maybe and then there's some sort of plant matter going on. And I like the idea of the myth or sort of the folklore that you can hear the sound of the ocean in seashells. I've always liked that idea. And but again, it's like not unlike a song. So that could be an idea, and then maybe I'm riffing on that idea a little bit, or just painting, usually just painting, and then I'll find these things later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally got you.
But there's certainly patterns of things that happen.
This next one's Drain Circle. The one question I was going to ask that pertains to kind of all your pieces, I know you enjoy painting larger canvases. Do you approach smaller canvases a little different? Is it more difficult, or, how would you describe that?
Yeah, it's actually, I don't know if it is that different. I do large ones as a rule when I can, because usually, if I'm moving around or if I don't have, I'm just sort of all over the place, I'll paint on, smaller works, which is fine and it's great. And I always think as well, I'm doing a bit of drawing at the moment. And when you're actually in the moment, again, it's your field of vision. So if you're just looking at a sketchbook, it's still it's very rare that I'm doing a drawing and wishing I was painting. I might wish I was painting later, but so the general rule is paint large when you can, because you don't always get the opportunity. And again, because I like to paint lots of things at the same time, ideally. So, and you can, as you can imagine, that's logistically, it's oil painting, it's smelly, it's messy, it's hell on time, it's hell on everything, money, relationships, brain cells, whatever. But yeah, but big is, it is, I think it's more fun, honestly. And that's not a comment on big paintings versus small paintings overall, but just for my process. Because I do love, again, I'm all about the field of vision, like whatever's filling your frame when you're looking at it. And if it is a sketchbook, that's because it's here. But if it's great to be able to sort of stand back from something and still have it fill your field of vision, I think.
That's great. And sorry, I'm having an issue. And we'll go to the next one, just because I know we want to have time for questions and everything. So this is Honeydew, same of the larger size, 72 by 56, 72 height by 56 wide. I love how the colors really relate here. You know, I see frogs. I think I see a fish. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so this, again, the process is the same. It's an improvised work. And you can sort of see in this one, because it started out with the blues and greens, the design of it. I don't know, do you have any detail shots of this, Billy? Maybe
Yeah, I can show you some details.
Because it's sort of, yeah, they read on a couple of levels, because quite far away, they read almost like abstract field paintings, if you like. And then, but I'm really interested in, like, you know, Hieronymus Bosch. I love the idea of, I love his works, how you have these, all of these different things occurring or unfolding, and they're next to each other, and the way that the eye moves around these things. And then you can kind of, if there's enough going on, you sort of can make your own narratives. In my mind, at least, it can read differently depending on how your eye travels around it. It can feel different depending on which way you go. Yeah, so this one started out with a more loose painting of the blues and the greens. And then, yeah, what came later is the editing, which in this case, and you'll notice I haven't built the figures up much. They're still underpainting, actually, pretty much. But the painting, the flat behind it brings those figures forward. So the paintings are always playing with that, the push and the pull of foreground and background. It's almost like it sort of undulates. So when the eye travels around it, it kind of moves around a lot. And they can get a little tricky. And that's why the black and white, and that's why drawing is a great exercise as well, because as soon as you use, you know, white paper with a black marker, it's more apparent what's foreground and background. Whereas with painting, there's more ambiguity there, which can be fun to play with, but it can be nice to do drawings as well, where you sort of, I don't know if this is true, but it feels a bit more like you're forced to make decisions a bit more. But yeah, and again, in this, you have a lot of themes occurring. You have these sort of elephant trunks and pearls I'm seeing here. Wooden spoons happen a lot. You can't see it, but the top shape in that one is the beginning of a funnel, which I kind of stole from, there's a lot of funnels in Hieronymus Bosch paintings, which I always like people with funnels on their heads and stuff. I always like that. Yeah, you have these almost like a pearl in a mollusk, the flat of a mollusk shell. You have bells, ringing bells. Yeah, and there's a lot of foot stuff going on.
Love the foot stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the foot stuff is, and again, it's that, the idea of, because I'm, you know, well, I won't get into all that, but the idea of worship is very, very fascinating to me as an atheist as well. Because if you don't have a belief system, the idea of worshiping something is fascinating. And I think humans are, in a lot of ways, wired to worship, or they have tendencies to want to do that. So I like things that are sort of fetishized objects, if you like, or things that people attribute more power than it might have. Because basically I'm really interested in things like the occult and stuff like that, but I have an aesthetic interest in it, and it's not based on I don't know how any of that stuff works, but I love the idea of images being invested with power and meaning. And that might not be the case, but it's wonderful when you're making work to think of it in those terms, I think. Yeah.
That's great. I was going to dig into, who are some of your biggest inspirations?
So my favorites, like a lot of people, Francis Bacon was my entry into painting. David Lynch, the filmmaker, is kind of my favorite artist in a lot of ways. Yeah, and I love Goya, Picasso, those ones. Contemporary, Cecily Brown, I love. I went to art school in Melbourne, and a lot of my teachers were I think they were maybe, I don't know how much older, but a lot of the teachers when I was in art school in Melbourne were painters that were going to art school in the 80s. And that was in my mind at least, a really good time for painting in Melbourne. There was a lot going on. So a lot of my teachers in Melbourne were big influences at the time. But yeah, and I love, yeah, but they're my big ones. Like a lot of people, Francis Bacon's hard to go past. He was the first one I got into, and I still love him a lot.
Yeah,
Billy, it's Lorenzo. I have a question.
Okay.
Can we go back to the last painting? Tom, you piqued my interest and attention in the last painting, the last one, this one here. Can you talk a little bit more about what the draw is to the occult from a visual standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint? Just because I think I have this similar draw, but it's not a philosophical one, and it's definitely not a theoretical one. But there's something there. There's a gravitational pull, but I'm not sure how to articulate it. And can you give us a little bit of insight on how you?
Yeah.
Do you want me to show some detailed ones on this, Tom?
Either or, Billy. That's fine. Yeah, no, it's a good point. I don't know exactly what. Like, it's a really attractive idea, but it's not one that I know much about. I love a lot of artwork that's based on it. A lot of the music I love draws on the occult and stuff like that. So it's really attractive to me. And I guess I'm interested in the idea of it being a lot of things that I think are available to us as humans that aren't necessarily that a lot of religious stuff has, but you don't have to be part of it. For example, I just like the idea that if you can have a symbol, it can actually conjure something in reality, or it could be dangerous. If you put two symbols together, then it could, like alchemy, for example. That's a good example. Like I'm not invested in alchemy as something that necessarily works, but it's a fascinating idea, particularly when you're painting. And, and then I think it's also true of music. When you hear things, like you can hear a song come together that can do something that's more of the sum of its parts kind of thing. So yeah, and that's not a great answer, Lorenzo, but I'm not trying to figure it out, because I don't need to know the answer. I just need to know there's a draw to it, but it is aesthetic. And I also think that it's available to humans just because we're human in a way.
And that's fine. I appreciate the answer. Yeah, I wasn't expecting a precise response, because a lot of this is not. Usually, I understand art is kind of there's different tangential touch points, but that's good enough. And I think Max has a question in the chat that might be speaking to your point.
Okay, Max, you can go ahead and ask it. I can't see the chat while I'm sharing. Or what is the question, Max says, Lorenzo? I'm trying to.
It was more of a comment.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question. It's just more that the interest in things like ritual and religion and all this kind of stuff seems to me just a drive towards systems of order. That as an atheist, one has to accept a certain amount of either scientific explanation or randomness and chaos. at least a belief that there is no control, that things are happening in the universe and that you're just there. And that's not negative in any way. It's just that the religion seems to me the drive to enforce meaning through ritual. And so my thought my comment was more to do with painting becomes ritual, and the ritual itself the painting as ritual becomes an ordering, regardless of whether it solves any problems or answers any question. It's the process of painting as ritual.
I think that's beautifully put. Yeah.
Tom, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, what Max said. I agree with that.
No, because the reason this kind of touched on it, I was driving to Pasadena earlier this afternoon, and on my drive, I was listening to a conversation in terms of like how Christianity, one of the strengths of Christianity is the fact that it's knee deep in mythology and all these characters, and not necessarily not in so much in the religious characters, but even outside of it, even in the commercial world. So for example, Christmas has this whole cast of characters that have nothing to do with the religion. For example, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, obviously Santa Claus and the elves you go from there. But it's like, then I was trying to think, okay, to Max's point, Christianity is I think one of its strengths is the fact that it has this great story, and we all need story. Tom, to your point, we all need story to believe in something. So if you eliminate that story, if you want to challenge that story, then what do you replace it with? So if you're an atheist, to Max's point, what do you replace that story with that's going to bring us together, or at least give us a sense of identity? It's a question I don't have an answer to, but it's something that just crossed my mind earlier this afternoon.
I'm not trying to bring anyone together or even necessarily get a sense of identity. It's more that I want the feelings that you can get from that. And that goes to Max's thing about the ritual. And the painting is a ritual, and it is, and I love painting. And when you're doing it, it's a big deal, because it's sort of, it fills your whole frame in that moment. And then when you introduce outside things, like when you're listening to music and painting, you can get into a flow state that really feels like, yeah. And I think as an atheist, you don't have to be too worried about what it means. So it's like, if the ritual in itself feels good for the sake of itself, then that's enough to just celebrate being a human and kind of.
Hey, Tom, that between what Lorenzo was saying and what you were saying, that both your work is built on like most artists, it's built on what went before. So you've got Bosch and Bacon and all these things that become part of the painting, in the same way that Lorenzo just mentioned Santa Claus, that there's all these Christianized things. Of course, they're all pagan rituals that were co-opted. And so you co-opt all these histories to strengthen the mythology of the activity or whatever you're doing. So, and painters do this all the time, is that they incorporate the mythologies and influence and visuals of other artists to build their own. And I don't mean this mythologies directly, but all paintings that in some ways are miniature mythologies in density somehow. So I'm not sure that I liked Lorenzo's comments, because they're looking at this kind of how myths are made, how history is made, is how paintings are made in some way.
Yeah, and I think that's a very attractive idea, making your own sort of mythology or your own, because it's, we've talked about this, Max, but the idea of atheism, investing things with your own meaning and, attributing meaning to it. So it can really be whatever you want it to be in a way. But yeah, I like the idea of, and I guess, and that's why I kind of lean on the subconscious a bit, because it's the idea of, I feel that if there's patterns and themes that keep reoccurring in the work, then in some way I'm getting closer to creating my own mythology, or at least a rhythm of characters or ideas or iconography that reoccurs in the work. I think.
Yeah. We definitely, thanks for the question, Lorenzo. And I think we all went down the path and learned a lot just then about Tom's style and where it comes from with being an atheist and everything else. You ready to talk about this one, or Osmosis Night Garden?
Yeah, sure. So this one goes with the one before it, which of the same name. They're actually two versions of the same painting, but they're not together. They're two separate artworks. And yeah, this, again, it focuses on a process of evolution. So this one, osmosis. So the idea of, so for example, plants get nourishment from water, and that's how they live. That's what creates their life. But I like the idea of trying to dramatize it and then having plants that feel thirsty. And then this has a kinky element too, because it's kind of like, there's a golden shower element. So there's this plants gasping for, whatever they're undergoing a transformation, whatever that may be.
Gotcha. And here's another, this is one that's about half the size of the larger canvases in the reeds. It's not gonna let me go too far, but you can get an idea of the size. And here we go, we'll get a more detailed shot of it. A lot of colors going on here, Tom.
Yeah, yes, there is. And again, this one, so in the reeds, I paint a lot of reeds, and I've been drawing them a lot at the moment as well. I like the myth of, there's a thing of getting in the reeds, getting amongst it, and it sort of goes with the floating downstream thing. You have this body of water. It was in a rowboat. In this case, the rowboat sunk completely. So you have this figure sitting there, and next to an embankment of reeds, and within the reeds, all these other strange things are happening. You have woodwind foot instruments being played by long fingernails. There's always a lot of amphibious frog figures or things. I try and show things in the state of evolution, as if they're not fully formed, but whereas evolution happens over a long period of time, I'm really interested in the idea of being able to show something in a process of evolution. And again, I'm happy for this to fail, but and that's again where I go back to religion. It's sort of the premise of why you would want to make something, or what would drive you to make something, can be interesting, even if it's not a sound reason in itself. So I think, I love the idea of, evolution is very slow, but painting's funny as well, because it's one frozen image, but it shows a lot of different times. So you have underpainting, then you have very built up areas. You have areas of built up painting next to underpainting. It's a bit tricky when you're looking at it on a digital screen like this. Everything appears more intentional, as if it's almost painted left to right, and these are all decisions that are made. But when you're actually painting it, it has more of a feeling of images evolving or emerging from their background and how they relate to their background. And in this one, there's a lot of, I don't really know in this one. It's playful, it's meant to be fun. There's a lot going on. A lot of pea pods as well. I paint a lot of pea pods.
Yeah, and I know we talked about Francis Bacon before. I mean, this one, to me, of all, has that almost, some people could see it as like a grotesque type scene. I don't know why. But between the nails and the toes and everything else, I mean, you said you get a lot of stuff from, Bacon. I mean, he's pretty much just an inspiration when it comes to everything, right?
Yeah, I'm a fanboy of him. I love him. But and I think it's funny you should mention Bacon, because this is probably as close as I get to having a central figure within a space, even though it's still a bit ambiguous because there's obviously a lot of figures going on around it. But the grotesque I'm very interested in, like the kind of carnivalesque grotesque, inversion of of I don't know what you would call it, but yeah, I think the grotesque is very interesting. You know, I love a lot of music that's kind of how do I say? Yeah, I don't know how to. Yeah, but I'm interested in the grotesque. I'm sort of trying to learn about that at the moment. Because I'm writing a thesis for school as well, and I'm looking at that at the moment, the grotesque.
Perfect. And this next piece, Submergence, triptych. If you know someone with a giant wall, I mean, this could go in any home. I wish I had a big enough wall to fit it. I love the flow of the colors, and how the story all revolves together. I guess give us some more input on it, Tom.
Yeah, so this one, and just so you know, because the white bits between them, they're 3 separate paintings. That just appears because we're putting them on this back wall.
Yeah, and I can take it off.
Which looks great, Billy. I love it. I'm just letting people know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this, what is it? Yeah, it's got an underwater theme. It's an ecosystem again, but there's a lot of mollusks, a lot of, sometimes I just feel, and this is what was interesting, Billy, when you got me to write about the work, I just felt by listing what's in them, it doesn't answer the overall question of what it's trying to do necessarily, or what it's trying to show. But, I'm interested in the magical realism, grotesque. If you can invent a convincing past for an evolutionary process. So if you can show something that's like, crustaceans or mollusks, seashells, pearls, there's feet with mushroom stems, there's frogs, like frogs in a spinning chandelier. Yeah, it's hard because I'm just describing what it is, but I don't, yeah.
No, I think it's very interesting when an artist describes their work compared to someone who's viewing it, because they're obviously not thinking the same way of what it meant to the artist while they were creating, or what they're seeing just as a viewer or collector. I guess with your works, and I'll move on to the next one. With your works, what's his question? Okay, well, Peter has a question for us. Peter, can you just ask it? Okay, you can read it. Tom, sorry, Peter Carr has a question.
Yeah, I keep seeing, I keep saying fingers, toes, and thumbs. I mean, I don't know why. It just seems to be popping out at me, and in many of the images, and how do they relate to the narrative of the image? And also, I'm just curious about color. Do you think about it in advance or otherwise?
Yeah. So the fingers and the toes. I mean, the foot thing's interesting because that was my first experience of worshiping anything. So I think that had a big effect on me. And I like the idea of fetishizing an object in the sense that it almost makes it amorphous, and you attribute human characteristics to it, or drama or feeling. So I like it's quite gestural as well. And the foot, so the foot's more of a kink thing. In terms of the digits of the finger, I'm interested in witches, and there's a lot of witches, like there's broomsticks in the paintings often, and there's often witches' fingers. And I think that, and again, this is something, it's not like I decide to put it in, it's something that's reoccurring. So I'm sort of, the analytical side of me is wondering what that is. And the best I can think is, I think it's an authoritative, strong female authoritative thing telling you what to do in a way.
Wiccan type witches?
Which one?
Wiccan?
Witches.
Type, or witches that, of Eastwick?
Oh, what's the distinction? I mean,
Well, Wiccan would be something a little bit more, deeply ingrained in perhaps an older philosophy and theology.
no. It's not. It's the second one. It's not an informed idea necessarily of what witches. And I that stuff's very serious, and there's people that really invested in it. I think, yeah, it's sort of an attraction thing. Like I like the idea of, it's, how do I say it and not sound superficial? That's the problem I have with this sometimes. Yeah, it's like a witch's finger and an authority, whether it's casting a spell or putting magic or an attraction spell.
So to some extent, I'm seeing it as a directive, directing the viewer or the narrative to find a location in order to rest upon, or otherwise.
Oh, that's a really good point, and I never thought of that might affect the way people view it. Because if you see a pointing finger, you're going to look at where the finger's pointing.
Well, not necessarily it's pointing in any direction. In fact, they're rather random, but is the point to take you somewhere or what?
Yeah,
I'm just curious because I keep seeing them, and I'm fortunate. I mean, no, I like them. It's just I have this cluttered mind that grabs onto things.
Yeah, no, and it's a great question, but Peter, I think it's about submission. If I get into it, it's about being told. So like a witch, either casting a spell or telling you what to do, and I think, and again, this, I don't know how to answer that, but it's a really good.
By the way, as a Catholic, a recovering one, I was told what to do,
right?
And I rebelled against it, but nonetheless.
But that wasn't a witch telling you what to do. It was very attractive. What's that?
They wore black.
Yeah. Yeah. The short answer is I don't know, but it's a great question.
Well, that's cool. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on. I just see it, and my other question was more on color. You didn't discuss it at the beginning, but do you think about it in advance, or I mean, is it just?
I do now. Yeah,
and how they relate to the narrative of the painting?
It doesn't, because if I'm making a color decision before going into the painting, I have no idea what the narrative will be. Even when I start the painting, it's, any narrative or, suggestion of narrative will come after the fact. So in terms of marrying, colors that suit particular narrative, I don't even get to make that. That's not a consideration that I have. It may be later, like maybe I'll do a painting.
Almost randomly?
So,
does it come up almost randomly and momentarily? And so
it did in the early stages, but then I started making color decisions, or I would choose color palettes before doing a work, and that's relatively recent. That's when I started learning some color theory, and I felt that gave me, because I always felt the black and white paintings had more freedom in them. There's something more where I can jump around more easily, and now, since the last year or so, having been thinking more about color theory, making those decisions, and to your point, maybe the colors influence the narrative, but I don't know. It's certainly.
I kind of feel that way in looking at them, and I also just as my, for whatever it's worth, I see a consistency and a uniformity in the chaos, which I get from your atheism. And I understand atheism. I'm a man of science, so I think about both sides of it. But I see uniformity in chaos, which is both religious and anti-religious. And I see the uniformity in the color, which is cool. That's the reason why I asked you the question.
I love that uniformity and chaos, and you've given me a lot to think about, Peter. I like that.
I have a cluttered mind. I apologize for that.
I appreciate it.
Anyway, I'm done. Lovely. I really dig your work.
Thanks, Peter. Nice to meet you. Great chatting. Thank you.
So sorry, Tom, we moved on a little just because we're over time and stuff. But I love the talking. Great question, Peter. So
Yeah.
let's tell a little people about Toes in the Grass. I know you have two of these.
Yeah,
We'll
so
kind of
this
show them
one
back
was
and
one of the
forth.
lies. Yeah, there's several paintings in here that I didn't do during the pandemic, and it wasn't intentional, but then I realized I wrote that, and then I was like, oh yeah, these were from last year. Yes, so I'm a bit fond of this painting because it was really in only a few goes. So it sort of has a freshness to me. But yeah, it's about the feeling of, because you always hear, people say the grass between your toes is meant to be a certain psychological thing, right?
Yeah.
Or a relaxation. I can relax, I can feel the grass between my toes. I love the idea of, because I like feet, and I like the idea of being grass, because I like the idea of just being, there's no ego in grass, it's just spread out. And then if you were grass between toes. But again, this isn't what I was thinking about when I did the painting. This is me as a writing exercise because of what you mentioned, Billy, about writing. So I sort of thought that would be a theme for it. But yeah, this is an improvised painting. It's got a witch's broomstick in it at the bottom, right?
See a monkey
There's
face, I think.
Yeah. And that was a face that kind of, you sort of see the suggestion of a face in there. So then I kind of enhanced the features a bit, if you can see that.
Yeah. No, I mean, all your work to me, the story always changes when I look at them, which was nice when I saw a description with them to get, the idea of what you were trying to get through your subconscious and layering and everything like that. I think it's amazing how you can layer the painting so well to just make it seem like every object is almost coming out to the viewer through the depth and everything, through the oil, which I wish people could see. Obviously they'll see. The best way to see it is if you purchase one. So you can email me at billy at universityofunknown.com or message. But you really got to see them in person. I'm going to show the Toes in the Grass, the pink one, to give everyone an idea of that one, the same,
yeah,
title, but obviously pink.
Yeah, so this was a painting after, I can't remember what order I painted them in, but they're individual works again, but they're the same thing. And again, I think because I'm a big music fan, so sometimes I love, an album, but sometimes there's a live version of a song that I actually prefer to the studio version. So to me, and visual art's so much about the idea of originality, or everything is, well, maybe it's not. Forget I said that. But I'm attracted to the idea of redoing paintings, or like doing a live version of it. So, because when you do it the first time, you're coming up with the imagery, but if you use one of your own paintings as the starting point for a new painting, then you're kind of riffing on your own riff. And then in my mind at least, it's a way to sort of, I don't know, kick the can further down the street. You just keep going along. And I think that because it's not like I do a painting and go, okay, whatever that is, I've done that now and I've got that out, whatever it may be. It's sort of like, I feel like sometimes I do a painting and it asks more questions and it gives answers. So I think doing another version of it emphasizes the playful, fun nature of why you might have done it in the first place.
No. And the one thing I was going to ask is what music first of all, you're one of the only, I mean, I wouldn't say the only people because, I work in music and I hear a lot of opinions, but I always love, the in-studio versions of music and then seeing them live and seeing if they can compare to what they've put down in a studio. But, that's just me with the live stuff. I'd rather, I guess right now we can't experience it in a concert. The worst thing is if anyone has watched the streaming music now, or like live concerts via Zoom. Not the
I
most.
actually haven't done that. No. What is it? Technical problems, or is it
It's
just?
just not that fun.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I have live recordings of things I listen to that when I listen to the studio version, it leaves me a bit wanting.
Yeah,
Honestly, some of it.
that's good.
I do listen to live music a lot because I mean, I love the alchemy of things coming together in that, and obviously a studio recording is a great example of that because it's all consciously mixed together. But sometimes with, if you listen to a live recording of certain music for long enough, then you can get addicted to the mistakes in it or little things that you hear in it. And then when you hear the studio one, it's just too clean. It's like, I want to hear that moment where those things were occurring at the same time. And I think there's something about that is a draw to painting as well. Because painting's very unforgiving. It's very hard to undo it unless you have the discipline to let it dry and then paint over it.
Or unless you use charcoal. I used to love charcoal because I could always erase the shit out of it.
Yeah, true, but it's still it's hard to cleanly erase.
Yeah, no,
So,
I get you.
no, you're right. There's no drying time. Yeah, I love charcoal too. I haven't done it for a while, but yeah, I love that.
Well, I just wanted to thank everyone. Obviously, thank Tom for letting me show his work. I loved everything. If this would be the time, if anyone has any questions, or anyone would like to purchase work or any statements or anything, now's kind of the free for all. You can kind of eat Tom alive.
Well, during this uncomfortable silence, before anyone doesn't ask questions, can I thank you, Billy? Because I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, no worries, mate.
Very kind of you. And I had a bit of a dramatic tantrum the other day.
Oh, he had at least 8 meltdowns before this show.
It wasn't 8. I had 2. I had a little hissy fit. I had 2 hissy fits.
Tell us about what happened.
No, I mean, I had one.
It was technical related. It was about I couldn't copy and paste an email properly. It didn't work when I did it, and in my mind goes to immediately, well, fuck this! I should have done this anyway. And it was
Yeah, he wanted to cancel it yesterday. We originally planned another date, but we pushed back, which was probably the best decision for everyone. But then it was like, I never normally let an artist in on all the stuff, but I let Tom mess with the press release and let him mess with the artsy and let him get it all into it because he wanted to learn the way of a gallerist. And I don't think I can ever do that again because it was.
Yes. I'm glad I ruined it for all of your other clients.
No, it was just a lot. Like today I went on and dimensions were changed and I was just like, oh, what do we do? But it's all good. It came together. And yeah, it's been fun. It was a good time. I like the nice thing, I guess the one thing that you get out of something like this that you don't get out of a normal show that I'll throw at a gallery or a space is you get to really find out what's going on in the artist's mind. Because most of the time when you go to a show, some people will talk to the artist. You might not get a chance to talk to them. If you're an artist I represent, some of you know that I don't let you talk because you're not very good at talking to people sometimes. But this is a way of really learning, and I thought it was really nice to just learn about Tom and his mind and how these all surface to become the fabulous and exceptional paintings they are.
Well, thanks heaps, Billy.
Yeah, no worries. Any questions, guys? Or, routing numbers, account numbers I can take. Checking's fine. Checks are good.
Where do you think these paintings are going, Tom?
Yes. I think I want them to get better, but not necessarily mature, if that makes sense. I had this thing because during the break, and I had more time by myself, I really felt that I reverted a lot to what triggered stuff in me very early on. For example, I've talked to both of you about this, but I was listening to Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath more than usual. Like I always listen to them, but more than usual over this period when I was making this work. So it's kind of like yeah, just those things. I just want more. And I'd like them to get better. I'd like them to get mature and people go, oh, these are great. I'm going to buy this. But, you know.
I feel, Tom, that you feel this way because you're so much more interested in the process and the creative process and the introspective values that you put into your work. So
Carlos,
congratulations.
my paint friend, you're right. I do love the process. Painting is a joy. It's fun. It's really fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you, buddy.
After spending enough time sharing a studio there for a little bit, yeah, it was a fun experience.
Yeah, painting's a joy, really. Everything else gets in the way.
This isn't really to do with the questions for you. I want to know what Brad Gross is doing. Those guys look like they're having fun.
Hang on, who?
Brad Gross, whoever that is.
That's
your dad, Billy?
That's my brother. That's my brother.
What's he doing? I'm not looking at the same screen.
I couldn't see him the whole time, so I don't know what.
You
Now I
guys
can see
watching a
him.
sports game? I don't know.
Oh, I just opened up the. Oh, right. Yeah.
They look like they're having loads of fun.
Yeah, he normally has a good time for sure.
Well, he's a gross.
Yeah,
no
he
doubt.
is gross. So yeah.
I guess we're gonna finish up. I'd just like to say, before we go, hello, Michael. Haven't seen you since Durden and Ray, so it's been a while.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
Nice to see you, mate. And I'm sure we'll see you again. Carlos,
I hope
Ishmael, I'll see you guys, and Stephen, I'll see you guys soon. Because we're going to head out. Tom, congratulations. Thank you, Billy.
Congratulations,
Oh,
Tom.
we're on mute.
Love you.
Thanks,
No,
Take
guys.
care, everyone.
Love you.
Congratulations, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll
Thanks,
talk
Billy.
to you tomorrow or something, Tom.
Great. Good on you, gang. Thank you. Thanks heaps for coming. It means a lot, guys. Thanks.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great
Congratulations.
evening and Merry Christmas and holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Billy.
All right.
Yeah. Good on you, Michael.
All right. See you, everyone. Take it easy.